Now, I did touch upon this skill when I looked at equivalent fractions, but the process of finding the lowest common denominator to be able to compare fractions is a pretty important skill, and I just wanted to have its own sort of PowerPoint just on that when my PowerPoint wants to work. There we go. All right, so essentially we've already know that to compare fractions, we have to have them in equivalent fractions with the lowest common denominator. So the process of doing this is we need to find what the lowest common denominator are between our two fractions. So in this case, the first one we've got is 4/5 and 7/9. What we are looking for is what is the lowest common denominator? So the lowest number that both 5 and 9 divide into. So one way you could do is you could list out the 5 times tables, you could list out the 9 times tables and look at what the smallest number is. If you know your times tables really well, you might be able to work that out for yourself, okay? For this case, I know that 9 times 5 is 45, so 45 to me is the lowest because there's no other time that the 9 times tables, at least in a smaller number, has a 5 or 0 at the end. So what I want to do is I want to represent 4/5 as a denominator of 45, and I want to represent 7/9 as a denominator of 45. Okay, so what I need to look at is well, what number would I multiply this by to get to 45? In this case, it's 9, okay, which means I have to multiply the top by 9 to get to 45. 4 times 9, well, that's going to be 36, okay? And then I need to do the same with the bottom, except multiplying by 9 won't get me 45 here. It'll be multiplying by 5, all right? I can see here, if I multiply this by 5, it'll get there as well. So 7 times 5 is going to be 35. And now we have our two numbers with an equivalent denominator that we can now fairly equate them, see which one is larger than the other. In this case, we've got 36/45 versus 35/45. Now 36 is greater than 45, so we can now conclude that 4/5 is actually larger than 7/9. How would I state that? Well, I say that 4/5 is greater than 7/9. Okay, the open section of this equivalent symbol, inequality symbol, is to the larger number. So 4/5 is larger, so this open part has to be pointing towards the larger number. Now, how might we do it if we're comparing more than two fractions? All right, because I've got 3 numbers here and I can easily see that I could compare 3/5 against 7/10 with a common denominator of 10 because 5 goes into 10 and 10 goes into 10. However, 3 will not go into 10. So 3 is not the lowest common denominator for all 3 of these values. So what I'm looking to do first is look for a number that 3, 5, and 10 all divide into that number. Okay, now one way you could do it if you cannot find it is to go 3 times 5 times 10. It won't give you the lowest common denominator, but it will give you something to work with that you can then compare them. All right, but if you understand other methods I showed earlier, or you know your times tables really well, you might be able to spot that 30 will work for all of them. Okay, so 30 is divisible by 3, 5, and 10. So what we want to do here then is we want to represent 2/3 as something over 30, which I then go, well, how much would I need to multiply this by? Well, that answer is 10, which means I need to multiply this by 10. 2 times 10 is going to be 20. I look at 3/5, and I need that as a denominator of 30. Now to get the fifths across, I would need to multiply by 6, which means I need to multiply this by 6. 3 times 6 is 18. And then our final number that we need to compare is 7/10. as a denominator of 30. So we can see here we'd have to multiply this by 3, which means we've got to multiply this by 3, which gives us 21 out of 30. So what we can now see is we can see that this 21 out of 30 is the largest. All right, then 2/3, or this 20 out of 30, 21 out of 30 is the largest, I meant. This 20 out of 30 is the second largest, then 18. All right, so what we can sort of say here is 7/10. All right, that's going to be larger than, where are we, 2/3, which is going to be larger again than 3/5. And that's how we can kind of represent our answer. So I know this is sort of touching upon what we went through in equivalent fractions, but finding the lowest common denominator between fractions and being able to convert to that lowest common denominator is just a really important skill that we're going to be doing when we need to compare things.